So I'll just kick off. Thank you everyone for joining us today. It's a pretty important subject and a pretty important matter. As we can see from the attendees, we've been receiving an overwhelming amount of information, an overwhelming amount of messages from people that can relate to the subject. Before I get into it, we are waiting for a keynote speech from Yasmin Al-Sharaf, which will be talking about the topic as well and how she relates to it. And then just to give you some house rules, we'll get into the discussion with the panelists who I'll introduce right after the session, tell you more about the session, its context, and what we have in mind. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. I'll just give a minute before Yasmin joins us here, who I know is logging in right now. So I think a few of you might be thinking, what is the relation with Tarabat Gateway and why did we decide to go about this? If you would have asked me 6 months ago, I would have said that we are already beyond equality in societies like ourselves and the rest of the GCC. We have equal rights. We have a lot of opportunities that don't really segregate or don't really preference one sex over the other. But over the last few months, we've opened up a significant amount of opportunities as far as employment go, growing our team in different jurisdictions within the GCC. We've grown our team and will now start operating out of Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Bahrain, and soon Saudi Arabia as well. So as we started putting out these job opportunities that were there, we started realizing that there was a significant gap in the number of applicants that are coming through. Hundreds of applicants for every role, but not even 10% of them were females. So it raised the question internally for us. Why are they all men? Why are only men applying to startups? Who can we talk to? This is obviously something that we need to discuss and get into. Something that we need to get into, but also something that we need to explore and something that we can relate to. We had a conversation with the team yesterday with some of the panelists, which I'll be introducing in a second. The conversation was very frank, very honest about people's journeys themselves. Some of the participants had an outside-in perspective, having operated in other jurisdictions, then moving into the GCC, which gave a beautiful perspective on not only why this is happening, but what we can do both as founders, as regulators, as government, to be able to make this a better thing. And really embrace both equality, but also at the same time, try to instill the confidence that's required for people to join the startup ecosystem and really instill the confidence that is required. It raised a few questions that we'll get into towards the later part of the topic. The questions that it raised were, is it culture? Is it character? Is it confidence? Is it upbringing? What is it and what can we really do about it? So I'll just wait for a message from the team. We'll kick off with the keynote speak. At 4:15, we'll kick off with the panelists and have an honest and frank conversation about it. And then towards the last 10 minutes, please feel free to drop your questions and then we'll get into that. So Danya, on your end, are we ready with Yasmin? Sorry, everyone, bear with us here. I know she was going to be a little delayed, but we're waiting for her. Okay, Yasmin's having some technical difficulties, so I'll just go ahead and introduce the panelists right now, and then we'll move into that. So we obviously are thrilled to be hosting today's session. Joining me by giving a warm welcome, please join me by giving a warm welcome to, first and foremost, Raja Al-Mazroui. Raja is the Executive Vice President of the FinTech Hive. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Raja. She's the driving force in Dubai behind the FinTech scene. plays a pivotal role within the emerging fintech industry. We've all heard of the fintech hive, but we'd love to hear more about her perspective on the issue, how we can solve it, and what she thinks we can do both as founders and regulators. We also have Delal Bouhidji, the Director of Financial Services at the Bahrain EDB, and she's the chairperson of the Women in FinTech out of Bahrain. Delal has always been a strong advocate of women empowerment in FinTech and has had a tremendous contribution to the development of an inclusive and supportive FinTech ecosystem. Delal and I have discussed this at length, and I think it'll be great to hear from her, both in attracting companies to the region, but also in terms of what she thinks we can do to support the ecosystem. We then have Hassan Sheikh. He's the head of marketing and business development at SmartCrowd and co-founder of Sempro. Hassan has moved from a traditional background, more in the consulting E&Y, into the heart of a tech startup scene in the UAE. Through his work at Sempro, Hassan has been supporting financial institutions and startups of all sizes to effectively scale up. So he'll be giving us both a perspective of from inside out, but also Hassan has moved from Canada just recently to the MENA region. So it'll be interesting to see what his perspective is on the ecosystem from that side. We also have Dr. Sena Farid. Dr. Sena is a pioneer in technology and innovation, played a role of both inside and outside of the ecosystem as far as startup and founding companies. So Sena, we're looking forward to hearing from you and your point of view on that perspective. Welcome everyone, thank you for joining us. It's a very sensitive subject, which can be seen as controversial. We like to say that the GCC is already open, equal, fair. I used to say that at least. We had a conversation yesterday and I think the statistics scared me. The statistics of the job applicants that we had gotten, having seen the hundreds of applicants that came through, and I'm not talking significantly just about the technical aspects of a business. I'm not talking about just developers, but I'm talking about applicants to general startups. We had hundreds of men that were applying, yet we had, I'd say, tens of women. It was an interesting perspective. We discussed it internally, and I'll start really with Raja. Thank you for joining us, first of all, and I'll start with you in terms of, you've been a driving force of the ecosystem in Dubai. You see startups, you meet with founders. Some people say that we are there already. So the statistics say different things. First of all, would you say that we are there at equality? Is there anything more that we should be doing? What's your perspective on the subject?
Thank you, Abdullah, for having me. And it's a great pleasure to be amongst all of you. And this is a topic that is really close to my heart. We are there in terms of opportunity or accessibility to the opportunity. However, we're not there in numbers. There is nothing in the ecosystem that stops a woman from joining the tech startup scene or a tech role. What is stopping us today, I think, is influenced by the choices that we make as women, or the awareness that we are exposed to of what options work for us. I personally am a tech graduate, and I chose this program of study back in the college days. And I think we were about 9 girls in the whole program. Everyone else was in business or in management or in communications. And I was just excited about the challenge. And that's what made me do that choice. Was I influenced by any member of my family or my mentors or my friends? No, I wasn't. However, today we continue to talk about this topic, myself, Dalal, and Yasmin, and everyone else in the GCC specifically, to create that awareness about that opportunity. The opportunity is there, whether we decide to take a step towards it. There is nothing that's stopping us in terms of either regulatory or cultural or any, I would say there's no barrier that would stop us from taking this choice. It's the awareness that we need to continue to talk about this topic to showcase the importance of women taking up roles in the tech industry, and what does it mean in terms of returns?
But now when you look at the sector as a whole, yesterday we had a very frank conversation with the team on the call, and all the panelists, gave their own perspective. Would you say, between the three, do you think it's culture? Do you think it's character? How can we instill, what do you suggest? That is it the role of government to promote? Is it the role of the private sector? How do we make sure that women have or the confidence and whatever it is that is not there at the moment for them to embark on this?
It's most definitely culture plays a major role in influencing this decision, Abdullah. And we're all change makers in our industries and our cultures. We have had the opportunity to tap into this area, and it's on us to create that awareness and engage more women. I personally, when we scout for startups to join our accelerator program, I look for at least one startup that is co-founded by a woman, if not founded by a woman. And it's very difficult, whether I am looking in the GCC or in the globe. It's not easy to find these women today. But I am sure a few years from now, we will have very equal numbers in terms of founded or co-founded startups by women. And from that realization that there are very few women who are taking those steps, we launched the Accelerate Her program, which is a talent development accelerator for women that takes women from the financial services sector and expose them to innovation and technology opportunities within the sector, either by working with startups or attending sessions, trainings, workshops, and showing them that they actually have that opportunity. Culture plays a major role in influencing our career and job choices. But at the same time, I know some people don't like to talk about either whoever calls it equal opportunities, gender balance, or women empowerment. I don't think we lack the empowerment. What we lack is the awareness about the options and the opportunities that are out there, and role models to communicate the value that we bring back to the industry and our societies.
I agree. I mean, we were talking about this yesterday, and something that came up many times is if we need to talk about the journey within the startups to get people excited about it, to get people excited about the journey or what it's like to work for a startup. But I'll just move to Yasmin for a second. I think, Yasmin, thanks for joining us. We had a conversation yesterday, and we're talking about women empowerment and what we think are the prerequisites. You see a lot of companies in your sandbox. You get a lot of applications. You see teams that come and pitch within regulators. Do you see this as a problem? Do you see the balance? Is it there, or is the statistic reflective of the reality?
First of all, I'd like to apologize for being late. I was in another panel and I was taking a little bit more than expected. And I'd also like to thank you, Abdullah, and your team for shedding light on this topic. I think this is the perfect timing due to the global pandemic, which is really driving financial institutions to digitize, and there's really placing technology at the very heart of businesses across different sectors going forward. So technology is going to be a pivotal player to encourage business continuity across different sectors. So I think there are huge opportunities. There are a different number of skill sets to be taught. And I think that this is a great time for us to be having this topic. To answer your question, the reality of the matter is that women globally are underrepresented when it comes to the technology sector as a whole. And I think that there are a number of different challenges that stop women from, first of all, pursuing careers within the tech sector, or from pursuing an educational qualification and related to STEM or other tech-related qualifications. But if I was to pick the top three challenges that I personally think are the strongest, number one, I think the prevalent stereotypical ideologies that we have are really preventing women today from pursuing educational qualifications in STEM-related fields. That's number one. Number two, I think there's a huge lack of awareness when it comes to the opportunities available within the tech sector. Women are simply not being informed about the job opportunities out there. There was a study that was undertaken by PwC on women in tech in the UK. This was, I think, dated back in 2019, whereby students of a university were surveyed. 16% of females responded by saying that they have been recommended jobs within the tech sector, as opposed to 33% males, which is the sad reality. And then I think the third challenge is the lack of female role models within the tech sector. This really emphasizes to women that this sector is really not for them, that it's a male-dominated sector, which really intimidates females. Personally, our experience in Bahrain, Abdullah, if you allow me to just shed light on that. I mean, Bahrain has always been a pioneer in recognizing the role of women. You know, this dates back to 1982 when we led government-led education programs specifically for females. And today we've got amazing initiatives that are being delivered by the Supreme Council for Women, which was established in 2001. And the Supreme Council for Women is really at the forefront of gender equality in the Kingdom of Bahrain. And actually, as part of the Supreme Council of Women's National Action Plan, which was deployed in 2013, entrepreneurship and innovation is at the very core value of that action plan. However, the reality of the fact is, and from what I observe as a female leader in the fintech sector in Bahrain, there is a huge gap in terms of women representation. Today, we've got around 33 regulatory sandbox companies. Out of these 33 regulatory sandbox companies, we've got 4 women or female founders. And that is a sign that, you know, this is the time that we should get together, work together. It should be a combined effort, you know, from the government, from educationals, academics, from the private sector as well, to get the ball rolling to tackle this issue.
Yani, Anna, I have to be honest from my perspective, and maybe for the audience and to the panelists, I was probably the biggest critic of any initiative that says women in or equality or whatever it is. I come from a family which is very female dominated, where they more or less run the office, run the show. They're all as academic, if not more academic than we are. And I think that I find it to be backward thinking to a certain extent. And then when I saw the statistics of the applicants, it made me realize, hold on, this is a reality. This is a reality that we need to address. But the question that was raised yesterday in our conversations was, but what do we do about it? Now, it's the same across. Now, if we just take not necessarily the technical aspect of it, but if we take startups as a whole, entrepreneurship, I usually say, if they ask me, by the way, what's the advice that you can give anyone that's even thinking of starting up a business? My usual advice would be join a startup. Join a startup before starting up a business. See if this is really for you or not. Don't jump from the absolute comfort of whatever it is you're doing that's institutional and jump into a startup, because it might be a completely different thing. I know that our ecosystem as a whole is still very young. Yes, we've had some great exits. It's starting to come up. But Delal, if I move on to you, and I want to know, we all know that this is a reality. On a broader context of the startup ecosystem, why is this happening? Why are females predominantly not jumping out of their comfort of their jobs? Is it society? Is it culture? Is it dependency? Is it needing that safety net? How would you look at it?
Thanks, Abdullah, first of all, for inviting me to this panel. And it's great to always share this panel with my colleagues, Raja, Yasmin, and Hassan, and Dr. Sana. You know, we've discussed this yesterday during our briefing session. And Raja mentioned it, and so did Yasmin. It's all about awareness. And I'm happy to see a private sector fintech company that is growing, that's leading on this initiative. In the past, it's always been government driven. It's always been, on a bigger scale, whether it's ministries or it's a government-led initiative. But it's all about awareness from the even smallest level, from a startup, from a fintech, to show okay, look, this is the opportunity here. So what you're doing at Tarabat Gateway is the right step forward to showcasing what the opportunity is, despite the gender, because you need diversity, whether it's gender, whether it's age. For any fintech company or any startup company, innovation is crucial. And for you to have innovation, you need to have diversity. And for you to be able to actually achieve that, you need to build awareness. And we are in a region right now, Bahrain, UAE, Kuwait, all of us in GCC, we are in a state that we're, as you rightly said, way beyond gender empowerment. And it's more towards showcasing the awareness. Now, one step or one point that I want to mention, why is this happening? You have to understand this whole startup ecosystem and fintech ecosystem is quite new in the region. A lot of the companies here are relatively small. They're all just probably close Series A funding. We don't have, the unicorns or those that just exited the deals. And usually what we see, entrepreneurs usually come from individuals that joined a company that said, hey, you know what, I can do this by my own. So, an ex, I don't know, PayPal or ex MasterCard person would be like, you know what, I've done this before. And my organization has been a great mentor and a great school. And you know what, I think there's a challenge in the society or the industry that I can actually tap into and resolve. And that's where you see entrepreneurs, and that's where you see a lot of different people coming into the picture. So I think it's awareness. That's mainly what it is. And I think, companies like you need to continue to build that awareness and to showcase the opportunity that a company such as Tarabat Gateway can provide to anyone who wants to join.
I don't want to personalize it to Raja and Yasmin, but I do have a question to ask, because I do believe that in order for people to get into startups or get into the entrepreneurial sector, you need to rub shoulders with entrepreneurs. You need to see the fire in their eyes, the pace in which they move, so for you to get excited. And I think in the GCC, there are two sects or two verticals that see most of the startups, and they are the regulators and the VCs. In the regulators, you probably see startups every single day. You speak to them, you see their teams, and you meet them. Within your team, within your organizations, is that something that you address? Do you try to pull trainees in? Do you try to get them in and tell them and to try to rub shoulders with these startups? Either of you. I just want to know whether it is something that is always on your mind.
For us, Abdullah, we work with startups. We have about 150 startups registered in our co-working space. And inshallah, once the travel ban are lifted, you will come over. And we have really created that ecosystem and networking opportunities for everyone within the community to interact with these startups. And what we have done through the FinTech Hive is also we do a monthly event. We call it FinTalks. It's a webinar, and we give it to one of our startups to talk about the technology, the solution, what they do with. And they used to do it in person, so we used to host them at our office. But now they're doing it virtually. So as a FinTech hub, what we try to do is to promote the community, develop the community, and integrate the on-ground community with the rest of the ecosystem. We have more than 65 partners in our ecosystem, and that's law firms, compliance firms, regulators, financial institutions, tech companies that work to support all the startups in the program or in the co-working space. And in the same time, through the community event, we bring everyone together. And what we've noticed is the startups, because they are starting on a very tight budget, usually bring in interns So we don't even charge the interns to use the space. We give each startup free access for a single intern. This way they start interacting with them, teaching them. And within Sarwa, I saw an example. Sarwa is one of our startups. At the very beginning, they had an intern, a lady that's a graduate from American University in Sharjah. She interned with them for 3 months, then they gave her a role, and now she's really engaged with the company doing the marketing and technology and so forth. So that was an amazing way of including that woman within that startup through that opportunity. I believe for women going to events and engaging with the community, and more importantly than anything else, is asking for the opportunity to be part of something. Women in general don't ask as much as men do. So I work with the startups and the guys are in my office all the time. Raja, connect me to this. Raja, do this. Can you send an email? But the women naturally don't do it. They think a lot, and they need to make sure they know what they're doing before they actually ask for it. So if we just let go of that conscious of, oh, maybe I couldn't do that. No, you can, absolutely. And you have the right to ask, and you have the opportunity and the ecosystem that support you to engage and work within these opportunities. So it's really important to bring the whole ecosystem together to create more opportunities like that.
I think they usually say, Dr. Sana and Hassan, I'll come back to you because I know you've both made the jump from one to another. But before I do, I just want to know whether your perception of, they usually say that in our part of the world, government leads by example, and government initiates and then the private sector follows. Either they open up a sector and then they allow the rest of the sector. Usually it's through regulation, through accelerator programs, through funding. When I look at the GCC as a whole, with no exception, and I look at the fintech sector predominantly, the regulators are female driven, all of them. The initiative is female driven. There must be a message somewhere there that someone's trying to say something, because it's completely female driven. And then if you look at their teams, whether I've spoken to both of your teams at length, they're also female driven. And then you speak to all of these regulators and put them together. And then you look at the ecosystem and you look at the startups. The startups are usually not, you don't see as many females there. Do you think, Yasmin, do you think that's something that is going to change? Do you think that we're going to start seeing people starting to get more confidence, whether it's to speak out and get into, and what would it take?
Yeah, Abdullah, I speak to a lot of startups. I speak to a lot of potential startups as well. And a lot of them are women. And I just want to say something. It's not a lack of ideas. By the way, I come across a lot of women that are interested to enter into the fintech space that have amazing ideas, but they're just not sure how to take that initial step, right? So I think what we need, what is lacking, is having mentorship courses or mentorship programs that can assist, that can provide these female entrepreneurs with more confidence to actually take that first step and to start exploring the different opportunities available out there.
So I'll give you one thought to both of you, and then I'll come back to you later. But just to plant a seed, as a startup, as a fintech startup that's doing something that hasn't been done before in the region, it means that you have to deal with government. It means that you have to deal with government. Government is known to be slightly bureaucratic. And let's be honest here, it's not easy dealing with government. It's not easy going to deal with banks that have male-dominated management teams and compliance and whatever it is. Could that be a reason that women feel, you know what, let's shy away from it. Let's start the typical kinds of businesses. Let's not get into the tech because I don't know how to maneuver within government and I don't. Just something to think about for a second and we'll come back to. Dr. Sana, you've made the move. And I genuinely enjoyed having the conversation with you yesterday because I think all of the participants would be able to gain insight on the move that you've made, what it took. And when you see other women that are on the fence, should I, shouldn't I, I'm comfortable in my job, should I jump in? but I have personal matters to attain to, advice from you. Is it rewarding enough to take the risk?
Yes, first of all, thank you, Abdullah, for having me join this panel with these amazing speakers. So just to clarify that the shift that you're talking about is that I am a medical surgeon. I was having a stable job, and then I realized that I can do more and be able to reach more people. So as I always keep saying that, you know, entrepreneurship, or if we talk in general about revolution, you know, we are living the fourth industrial revolution, which is literally is going to impact everything that we do, from education to the way we work and our lives. Just like the previous industrial revolutions that came, steam, electricity, internet, and now the age of intelligence. So there is no escape. This is the number one fact that you want to understand it as, you know, as human, as a nation. Second, it comes our roles as a responsible citizen. The shift that I took was merely coming from me being educated, having the privilege of, and it's really, people don't consider this, but being a GCC, a GCC national, or especially a woman in GCC is a privilege. We do have a huge amount of support from education to higher education to a lot of things in our life. So for me, that was a wake-up point that I am privileged amongst many people in the world who don't even, probably sometimes they don't have the basic education in many parts of the world, even now in 2020. So being educated, having the intelligent part in you and having a supportive system is enough responsibility for me to take a next step. It is up to me that I decide that I want to help, 10 people every day, or that I look at the big picture and I need to help more people. Not only I need to help more people myself, but also place my country, which is Bahrain, as a leader in innovation, in women-driven initiatives, because this is not about me or the people who are with me in this panel. This is about, you know, we are literally leading the way for future generations. Whatever we are talking today, this is marking a step in the history where the future generations are going to learn how did the previous entrepreneurs take it from them. So it's a responsibility. And my story is actually an example that because this panel is focusing on women and technology particularly, for me, of course, technology is a sector and a very, very important one. More important, I am, unlike, you know, most of you, I did not start with a degree in technology, okay? Technology for me is a mindset, is understanding that there is something that can help you move forward. Whether you are a woman working in fashion, whether you are a woman working in banking, in education, in any sector, technology can be a tool that is pushing you to move forward. I need to highlight this because in my path, I have seen many of the women are afraid to gain extra skills because that is time consuming. It takes extra, you know, finances to gain another degree in programming or you know, coding and stuff like that. So first of all, building up the mindset, and of course, I would agree with the rest of the speakers. There are a lot of supporting factors that we have, especially here in the GCC.
So if there's two things, I think education is very important, but you also, for two other viewers right now and participants that are on the fence thinking, I don't have the technical capabilities, I worry about not being technical, should I join it, should I not? From what I understand from you is saying, is that you don't necessarily have to be a technical expert. You need to aspire and have that entrepreneurial fire in you. Is that what you're saying?
I think here, the easiest example that everyone can relate to is of, let's talk about a hotel. You know, we all know how hotels work. Not necessarily that the hotel owner is also the designer. He's not a chef. He's not the interior designer. He's not the architect. But the hotel owner or the manager knows how to run the show and knows how to place his hotel from being a 4-star to a 5-star to a 7-star eventually. This example is being applicable everywhere. Not necessarily a restaurant manager is also the chef and also managing all the waiters. The success in working spaces, whether it's government or private, is all about collaborative learning. You know, there are different stakeholders that make the dish come out beautifully, from designers, from technical people, from management people. It's as simple as that, and it's exactly how it is applied in entrepreneurship journey, in startups. Myself, I'm working with a diverse group of people where myself, I'm having the instructional designing capabilities, and I have a mixture of people who work with me with different backgrounds. From them, I also seek the technical knowledge. This, in fact, it's not necessarily that I am spending more time gaining knowledge. I could be, by starting a venture, I could be empowering or giving opportunities to tens of more girls and guys out there who actually have the degrees. So it's actually creating a mixture and knowing how to come out with a successful venture.
Yeah, we usually say that everyone is in a startup is an entrepreneur. This is what I was telling the team yesterday, is genuinely anyone who joins. If you want a free MBA, join a startup. You learn everything there is, whether it's finance or product or marketing, you'll be involved in everything. So Hassan, last but not least, ladies first was the rule of the session, but I do want to, you've done both, and you've also seen ecosystems abroad in the startup world. When you compare, I mean, you go to a lot of the accelerators. When Raja talks about the FinTech Hive, and I look at, for example, Level 39 in London, or I look at WeWork around the world, wherever you go and you walk in, and you see a balance. You see a balance, and we're not talking about founders here. We're talking about team members. We're talking about, we want the startup ecosystem to be equally represented. What is the problem? What is the problem? What do you see?
First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be on this panel. And thank you to all my esteemed panelists and speakers as well. Great question. I think when we look at the problem, one of the things that we need to, first of all, realize is that, you know, whether it's an accelerator here or whether it's an accelerator in London, the culture that we cultivate is more or less very similar, right? Because we are essentially the innovators, right? These are the people that are driving change, and these are the ones that are going to make change moving forward. So that's one aspect of it. But one thing that I do want to touch upon, which Raja mentioned, which was really important, and even Yasmin, which was the feeling that women need to ask permission, particularly in this part of the world. So as Raja mentioned, she said, you know, there's more men in her office coming in asking for certain favors or trying to get, you know, ahead in terms from a business perspective. And it's one thing that I mentioned yesterday as well in our call, which was what's interesting in doing some research for this panel, something interesting that I came across was that typically when women apply to jobs, or whether that's a startup or a technical role or anything, you know, that seems a bit more advanced from a STEM perspective, they typically try to fit in all the, you know, points of the job description. So if they don't fit 9 out of 10 points, they're not going to apply to the job. Conversely, men, if they fit 6 out of 10 points, they're applying. And I think that comes down to the fact that, you know, women are maybe perhaps a bit more self-aware, men are maybe a bit more overconfident, and maybe it's a combination of those two. And so what you end up finding is, particularly in the startup scene, it's very much it's very much, you know, building a plane while you fly it. And I think when it comes to from a security perspective of how women are, particularly in terms of the assurance that they want, sometimes I think they don't jump in because they want to be absolutely sure. And as it turns out in the startup sector, you can't ever be sure.
I mean, you see, there's no doubt about top performers. In my opinion, in my professional life, I'm closer to 40 than I am to 30, but I've seen my fair share of performers. And I think that it's definitely out there that women tend to want to deliver the extra mile when it comes to the startup ecosystem that I've seen as well. But how do we change that? How do we make sure that that's implemented in the GCC? I've written a few themes that I've heard from everyone on the panel, and I want to get a message across to the participants, whoever's on the fence, and thinking of, should I join a startup? Should I start a startup? To me, it's genuinely the day we'd be proud of seeing equality in this, in the statistics themselves. I heard a few things. I heard engagement, we heard awareness, but awareness of what? Awareness of what should we focus on? If we make this an initiative moving forward, should we focus on awareness of what it feels like being in Dr. Sana's perspective, starting up a business? Should she be mentoring and talking about it? Or is it awareness about being part of a startup, whether you're a CFO or whether you're a compliance or whatever it is, and what your life is like? Do you really have a 9-to-5? Do you work around the clock? What does that feel like? How rewarding is it? And then there's really the confidence and what it takes to jump the fence. I'd love to hear, just conscious of time, but in a very short, and I want to go around all panelists, what do you think we can do? We want to raise awareness. We all agree on that. Everybody said it. But what kind of awareness should we raise? Is it the lack of mentorship? What should we do? Maybe I can start with Yasmin.
Yeah, Abdullah, if you allow me, I think the first step should be, it should be a collaboration between government sector, between the public sector, between the educational sector, coming together to put in place a full program that will encourage and foster more gender equality within the tech sector at large, within specifically fintech sector. And I think one of the most important points of awareness that we require or that we lack in this part of the world specifically, it's the mentorship. What we need is female role models to provide mentorship to other potential females that are interested into entering the tech sector.
If you look at...
Abdullah, if you allow me, can I just share my screen for a minute? Because I prepared a few stats that show or provide a representation of the female participation in the tech sector in Bahrain, if that's okay. Can everyone view the screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
So as you can see, we've got a significant portion of female graduates, out of STEM specialties in higher education in Bahrain. Around half of our ICT jobs workforce in Bahrain is comprised of females, right? However, if we move on to the next slide, and this slide really shows the breakdown of employment in Bahrain within the fintech industry, specifically by sex. We see a clear gap here. So as I mentioned earlier, I don't think that it's a lack of interest from women. The interest is there. However, it's the lack of the confidence or the lack of the know-how on how to take that initial first step into the sector. So we definitely, yeah.
So this is, Yasmin, what I want to get to. Now, if we wanted to solve this problem, and I just want to go around the table and see, because this is exactly the problem that we want to fix. Now, if that's the case, and we go around the table and we say, okay, when a woman graduates and she's 21 years old, she's just finished her studies, out of university, she has a new tech background and is looking for a job, how can we make sure that she evaluates or her family evaluates the the startup equally to, you know what, joining a bank or a government job or whatever it is? Is that where the problem lays? And how can we basically change that? Can we just go around the circle and then we can come back to the presentation? And what I really want to know is, for the next session, so that we can make a success out of this, what can we do about it?
Abdullah, can I just jump in here and just tell you my thoughts? As I am part of the Economic Development Board, I also chair the Women in FinTech Initiative in Bahrain. And the mandate that this initiative has is to build awareness and to also support the growth of FinTech, but also build ties with similar organizations and initiatives across different geographies. And for us to build awareness, we do multiple things. We either speak to students at early stage that are still confused, don't know where to go and study at university. We also speak to university students that are actually in the STEM graduates or to graduate soon, and guide them on the opportunities that are available in the region. But also we speak to a lot of traditional financial institutions and tell them, you know, the future is fintech, and this is what you could participate in, and this is what you can do to further grow the ecosystem. But also we kind of showcase success stories and show people that people can actually add to the fintech ecosystem, not by only being entrepreneurs, but being, for instance, the regulator like Yasmin that we have here, or for instance, doing the research work that we have, for instance, different organizations such as Bahrain Fintech Bay that does a lot of publication in fintech. Everyone's contributing to fintech, and these are the opportunities that are available. So I think the more we do that, I think the better. And you actually taking the initiative to actually create this panel, I hope other private sector companies do the same, because that's also the kind of awareness that is needed as well.
So I'll make a statement. I think my goal is to be 50-50 as an organization by the end of the year. I will try my best. I will need support, but if the applicants stay at the numbers that they are, then it's physically impossible for us to do it. The one thing that I want to ask is maybe more towards Raja is if your niece, your cousin, your sister just graduated, she's 21 years old and she's looking for a job, and she gets 2 applications. One that is an institution, the other is a Series A/B just startup. Now that you've been in this sector as long as you have, and you've rubbed shoulders with both institutions, government and private sector, what would you tell her to do?
I'll definitely tell her to join the startup, because the benefits and the value and the contribution that she will be creating has a higher impact. First of all, at the earnings level, she will be a shareholder. She would be investing her time and money in something that she's very passionate about, and she co-owns with a group of individuals. The opportunity for her to grow and to grow the company is huge, because she's her own boss. Being part of a startup usually comes with those opportunities. And if she's passionate about it, she won't have the 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 hours to worry about. But not everyone is equal. So I have a couple of my nieces, and they ask me the same questions. Some of them prefer to do a set job, certain hours. I go to my office, I do the job, I finish, and then I go home. So it really depends on what drives them. So I always ask, what is it that's burning you? What is your purpose? What do you want to do? So we go deeper in that conversation rather than that. One point I just want to highlight here is with the coronavirus and the pandemic at the beginning of this year, we were all cut off from our offices. We were locked down at home, and our kids were on online learning. All of my sisters were helping their kids with the online learning. Even the one that had a fear of technology was able to get on all of these platforms, follow up on all the assignments, make sure that they are signing in. That fear has disappeared today. Whoever had the fear of technology has disappeared. The pandemic accelerated the tech transformation. And today, what we need, the awareness that we need to create is you can be your own boss from your own home, because you know how to deal with all of the tools. You've used all the online tools for grocery, for shopping, and it's exactly the same. Just like Dr. Sana mentioned, if you run a hotel, you don't have to be the chef or the manager, but you have a concept. And today, if you know how to use these tools, you can put them together and you can launch your business. That's the awareness that we need to support, to engage more women in the tech industry, and also to being entrepreneurs and running their own startups.
Agreed. Yasmin, would you agree? Startups over institutions?
Definitely, 100%.
Dr.
I mean,
Sana?
it's not only nice to have women, Abdullah, within the tech sector or within the startup scene, it's also economically beneficial.
Yeah, no doubt. Dr. Sana, can anyone join a startup? What does it take? What are the characteristics that a person must have?
First of all, before answering this, I think the reason why essentially we're even discussing about startups is because I have been asked this frequently, is that why? I mean, why don't you go just for a government job, which is giving you stability and security and all of that? The answer to this is that the way we work is changing. Just like Ms. Rajal quoted about the pandemic, you know, it has taught us how things overnight can become unconventional, which literally means that we just need to be prepared. Of course, it's amazing to have a secure job, which is promising you, you know, periodic, promotions in your career. But becoming part of the startup is in order to nurture your own creativity, have your own ambitions come out, and empower you to actually empower more and more people. This is how it is. About it's easy or it's not. Of course, it's very much easy, especially in the GCC countries. That's why, you know, entrepreneurs by nature, we are focused on creativity. We do have our own ideas, and we need to have the freedom of the time and freedom from all the technical and the legal issues. That's why there are a number of hubs across all of the GCC cities that are helping us do that. So for me, anybody who's thinking about it, it starts with their own mindset and their determination to step into it. It's difficult, it is challenging, just like any other job, but stay determined to your cause.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. I think with the COVID situation, which has really transformed a lot of our lives and the way we do things, you mentioned one thing, Dr. Sana, which is pretty important, I think. We tend to look at institutions as secure. We tend to look at institutions and larger institutions as secure as far as job security is concerned. Yet, if you look at the COVID situation, it was the startups that were really hiring as fast as possible while the institutions were firing. When you look at job security, we've been hiring as fast as we have. You have the venture world that is trying to deploy all this capital into startups, because while people are pulling money out of fixed income, people are looking for these opportunities, and they're looking for opportunities. There is so much capital that's out there looking at venture, but not so much capital looking at institutions and manufacturing and things like that. So I think, Hassan, you've worn the consultancy hat. You've seen organizations as they prosper and as they develop. Would you say that if you were to advise any of the viewers, and if they were thinking of, should I join an institution, or you've joined an institution and then made the jump, I tend to say, I wish I had done this 10 years ago. And right now, what would your advice be? What's your point of view?
So I'm going to second, Dr. Sana, in terms of context is super important, and it really depends on the person. I know it's not the best answer, but one thing that I will say in terms of solving this problem, in terms of this gender disparity, what we need is a systematic approach. And I heard you say, you were giving questions to the panelists and saying, when someone comes out of university, should they go to a startup? Should they go for a Series A? And I think the conversation we need to be having is even before then, because, as Yasmin has already showed us some of those statistics in terms of women going into, the fintech sector or the startup sector, I think the important conversation to have is, well, how many of those women are going into the STEM programs before that? Because by the time they get into the workplace, that's just a symptom. That's a symptom of the problem. So you're not really solving the problem, which you should be earlier on, in terms of building that awareness, as Dalal has mentioned before, for women, to let them know that these avenues exist. So when it comes down to answer to your question, when it comes down to, whether going down the corporate route or to the route of startups, I think there's benefits to both. I can definitely speak for myself. Going down the consulting route, it teaches you a lot of processes, teaches you how to think systematically, break down problems, which is extremely important, work with a lot of different people, different stakeholders, builds your network. So I definitely think that there is a benefit to working in a larger organization for a couple of years after, building your network, and then maybe perhaps not staying too long and then diving or moving out and then venturing out in the startup.
So we're getting some great questions, and I don't want to make it generic, because I don't think that we should stereotype, and I don't think that we should profile Are women risk averse, for example? I don't think all women are the same. I think everyone's completely different. But there's a very interesting question here that comes. How do women perceive the tech startup environment or startup environment? And how is that aligned to the environment or culture of what women look for in an employer? So when you're joining a team, do you think anyone want to share any thoughts on that?
If I can add to that, please allow me if I have the permission. So I think as being a woman, you know, even when I was before my entrepreneurship journey, for me, I wanted my employer not to look at me as a woman. And I'm not sure how many women will agree with me about that. I wanted to be treated based on my individuality and my degree and my talent and my intellectual diversity. I think as much as we, male or female, as much as we try to focus on the diversity of thought, we will be soon, you know, coming out of this gender diversity, because whenever I am going for a job or whenever I am being looked by other male or female counterparts, I don't want to be looked as a gender specific person. This is again my personal opinion, but again, the same thing will be improved if I deal the same way with the people who are coming, you know, after me.
I wanna wrap up with a word of advice from each of you. A word of advice from each of you to any of the viewers. Anyone who's watching this would probably have one of two situations. Either they are considering joining an institution or a startup, or starting a startup, or having experienced this disparity in, for example, the sector as a whole. Feel free to raise your hands. Any one of you can answer first. But what would your advice be to anyone who's viewing this right now?
Abdullah, maybe I can kickstart. So I think if anyone here is interested in learning about fintech and is interested to take part in fintech, there's multiple platforms to understand what exactly they can do, whether it's on different, you know, social media platforms, or even reaching out to the company's website. And there's a lot of news out there, and you can understand and see where you feel comfortable and where you can add value. And then my second piece of advice is find a mentor. If you find a good mentor, I think that will really clarify the whole path and set you straight and kind of like guide you on the right path. I think mentorship is very important. So if you can find the right mentor, go ahead and don't be shy, you know, just tell them like, look, I really admire what you've done and I would love to learn from you. And I'm pretty sure a lot of them will say, sure, you know, they'd love to help.
Abdullah, if I may just add to what Abdullah, I agree with everything she said. You know, as a leader in the fintech sector, I would really like to take this opportunity to call upon females that are watching this today and to really inform them about the different opportunities within the sector. It's a very dynamic sector. The limit is the sky in terms of what you can do. There are different skill sets, very interesting skill sets to be taught and to be learned. For example, AI, coding, just to name a few. Failing, you shouldn't be afraid to fail, if anything. And I would really urge them to approach the regulator, learn about our regulatory sandbox. Regulatory sandbox provides you with a very safe environment to test out your solutions, your ideas. It doesn't matter if you make it through or you don't. At the end of the day, you'll gain a lot, you're going to learn a lot, and you're going to be much stronger.
Great. Rest of the team, anyone want to say anything?
Yeah, I think I'll just second that as well. I mean, I agree in terms of mentorship, extremely important. And perhaps the other piece of advice that I would give, and this is very general and can be applied really to anyone, which is when you approach a startup, number one, of course, it's very easy to get in touch with people at startups, you know, just through LinkedIn. We're fairly approachable. There aren't many barriers there. That's one aspect of it. So it's easy to start a conversation. So you don't necessarily need permission. That's one aspect of it. But the key thing is pick a boss more than the role. And I think that's super important when it comes to mentorship, because as we discussed this yesterday, there isn't, well, or we don't see as much mentorship here in this part of the world as we do in other places. Once you come across someone who's exceptional, they've done what you want to do, I think it's very important to look at that person and, you know, ask yourself if you want to work for them rather than this specific role, particularly early on in your career, because that person is probably going to teach you more. And I think that's one of the decisions I made earlier on in my career, and that paid off.
That's great, Hassan. Thank you. Good job.
If I may add here, I know mentorship was mentioned a few times, and this is probably why we've tried to build this mentors network out of the FinTech Hive, which is available to women from all over the world. And it will give us a lot of pleasure to work with Dalal and Yasmin in terms of onboarding you ladies as mentors, and also any women that are watching this webinar who wants access to mentors from the financial services sector. We have men and women who are supporting the cause, who are providing pro bono time to mentor these women. And today with Zoom, everyone does it virtually. And I also mentor women. I've actually had a session yesterday with a lady from Canada and last week from a lady in Ireland. So it's really amazing to connect with different networks all over the world. It gives you a different exposure, different ideas. And my idea, my recommendation to anyone that's watching today, I would say, reach out and connect. Go to events, sign up to webinars, to listen to all of these small tips, because they will help you take major decisions within your life. And don't be afraid. It's as easy as anything else that you can do.
I think the world is changing. We've seen startups revolutionize Southeast Asia. We've seen them revolutionize and transform all of the West. I think just to wrap up, I think we're about to see a lot. It would be great. I hope that this session has at least instilled or planted something in the viewer's mind in terms of where to go if they're thinking about it, if they're thinking about joining, where should we go next? I'm just conscious of time. We could stay here forever and talk about it, I know, but I hope that this is a start of many sessions. I think that we all know what our responsibilities are right now as a founder, as a leader in the sector. I think that it's clear that there's a few things that we need to instill in the founders that we work with. There is a social responsibility. The same way that corporates go out and do social responsibilities in startups, even though we have limited resources, I think our social responsibility as founders and as team members in startups is to pull as many people as we can into this ecosystem, raise the awareness within our societies, within our circles, to get people to really understand what it's like to work for a startup. And only then, I think there is this one thing which I always talk about in our part of the world, which is this fear of failure that we need to get rid of. We will see startups fail, but we will learn and they will get up and we'll do more things. So I hope that is a session, or this is what we can make out of the session. And I hope all of you can walk out of this with a new charge to be able to instill it to the people around us. So again, genuinely humbled by all of you for joining us. Thank you. To all the panelists for accepting, and I hope to see you all soon, and that we can plant our own seeds wherever we are to be able to make this a better reality. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Abdallah, for hosting us.
Thank you so much.
Nice to see you all. We'll see you soon, inshallah. Thank you.
Inshallah.